Hello again, rail fans. Today we're going to take a little trip up to South Georgia to do some dark territory rail fanning on the CSX Thomasville and Dothan subs, known to those in the region as the Bow Line. This is ex-Atlantic Coastline Railroad. They got it from Henry B. Plant, who ran it as the Savannah, Florida and Western Railway way back when. Now, it did not run to Florida then, but it gave Plant the start he needed to get into the Sunshine State. Technically, the Bow Line runs from Savannah, Georgia, down to Jessup, over to Waycross, to Thomasville, Bainbridge, Dothan, Alabama, and on to Montgomery, Alabama. You can see how it got its nickname. But Savannah to Waycross assumed a much larger role for the ACL in later years, so the Bow Line west of Waycross was separated into its own route.
The adventure starts out in the tiny town of Climax, Georgia. This is the busiest intersection. Just one flashing signal is all that's needed for traffic control here. Climax is so named because it's at the top of a long hill that climbs out of the Flint River Valley, starting at Bainbridge. Like the other communities on this line, Climax is a farming town, but we're here because of the passing siding and what's in it. A724, a northbound local out of Waycross for Montgomery, Alabama. He runs daily on the Bow Line, and right now he's waiting for Q237, auto racks from Louisville, Kentucky to Baldwin, Florida. Now, 237 doesn't normally run the Bow Line, and that's why I'm rail fanning the Bow Line today. In about 30 minutes, southbound Q237 shows up.
Y'all got a crowd over there, though.
This was the reason I drove the 301 miles to southwest Georgia in such a flash this Saturday. CSX is rerouting some of its Florida trains over this old coastline track, while their primary route, the Fitzgerald sub, is under curfew, being retimbered and resurfaced. Over the last decade, the Bow Line has been reduced to a 25-mile-per-hour backwater railroad. But something's afoot at the planning offices in Jacksonville, because starting at Waycross, they've been upgrading the old Thomasville sub with continuous welded rail and new structure, and have put the speed limit back to 40, where it used to be. Now, this could be just a spruce up to get it ready for sale, the way you'd put on a coat of cheap paint and a few shrubs to put your house up for sale. Or it could be a plan for a real service upgrade. We'll see. My guides are Charles Burgess out of Cairo, Georgia, along with Will Newberry up from Tallahassee, Alan Williams out of Valdosta, and William Shue from Pelham, Georgia. When 237 passed, the conductor walked up to the switch and lined it for the siding. This is mainline railroading the old-fashioned way, dark territory, no signals or powered switches. There are a couple of radio switches and a couple of spring switches out here, but that's about it. Out A724 came. A724 is a Bow Line local that runs the entire Bow Line from Waycross to Montgomery, Alabama, the entire 292 miles of the line. That's a hefty run for a local. It would take 6.5 minutes to get this train all the way out to the main line. Then the conductor has to line the switch back for the main and lock it. Normally he would have had to walk all the way back up to the locomotive, but Charles Burgess gave him a ride up to the next crossing, saving him that 15-minute walk. We chased A724 up to Bainbridge, hoping to get him crossing the Flint River. And we did, but we parked 1,100 feet from the center of the bridge span, and 724 wasn't waiting for some old rail fan to carry his camera and tripod uphill on a river bridge. But at least I got some of him crossing this old through-truss structure, and in very good light. Bainbridge is a port city on the Flint River and once upon a time carried barges loaded with petroleum, coal, grain, and lots of other agricultural commodities up and down river to the Gulf. That's why the bridges across it either have opening spans or high clearance arches like the one we're on. That's all gone now. The river level is now too low for any barge traffic. After this, we ran eastward to Thomasville, where my guides knew there was an empty coal train getting ready to come north toward Montgomery, another visiting reroute train on the Bow Line. We drove to the north end of Thomasville Yard. Here and at the south end are remote-controlled switches to speed switching along. The hopper train, EO15, was just starting to double out. Led by an ET44AH, an original CSX AC4400CW, and number 7200, a Wabtec rebuilt AC44, now called a CM44AH. Ironically, the two trailing engines were bought by CSX in large numbers from 1993 to 2004 to haul their huge coal business. Wabtec has modernized 10 of them for CSX, with plans to do 40 more in 2020. Why would they have yarded an empty coal train instead of just leaving it on the main until the new crew got here? Well, this is one of the issues of precision scheduled railroading on a 1950s-era piece of line. The empty train out of Bostwick, Florida near Palatka is actually longer than the length of Thomasville Yard, which is only about a mile. Leaving it there intact or solid would have blocked the entire railroad, which would have been hours because the relief crew wasn't ready when it got here. So the inbound crew had to bust the train and put it in 2 yard tracks where it would fit while it awaited its new crew. The longest pass track on the main line is at Manor, 9,000 feet, but that's only 7 miles out of the terminal at Waycross. Doesn't do much good way out here, and the sidings get smaller as you go westward toward Montgomery. We're getting this train today because it's a stranger on this route, but I try to shoot every coal train because they're disappearing. It's my belief that within 10 years, power plant or thermal coal as it's known will be all but gone from America's railroads. We jumped back 11 miles west to Cairo, Georgia to get one more shot of EO15 in the fading light. The most popular shooting spot in Cairo is the 5th Street overpass. Down to the right, where that cut spur track leads, is where the giant Roddenberry plant once stood. Folks in the South will recognize the name Roddenberry for cane syrup, pickles, and peanut patch boiled peanuts. The family sold out to Dean Foods in 1993. Dean then moved everything north to its own plants. In 2019, Dean Foods itself filed for bankruptcy. EO15 continues its quiet roll through Cairo and off into the sunset. Next morning we were up early and set up just east of Valdosta on the Bow Line. Everything is quiet on a South Georgia Sunday morning until the train gets here. This was A923, the Sunday job of A723, which is the regular Montgomery to Waycross local. Predominantly boxcars today. Now, my project goal was to shoot trains running the CSX Bowline, but guide Charles Burgess said there was some NS action coming, so we broke off to the south for that.
What do you think, Charles? What are we going to do?
I think we can get a 209, a 229, and it sounds like we got a 63N that we might all be able to intercept before we get back and catch some CSX action.
The Norfolk Southern's GS&F district south of Valdosta is high-class road with few crossings and no population centers. So a piggyback like NS 229 is free to run. After 229, we loaded back up because Charles already had another southbound on the radar.
We're going back into Valdosta to try to find 209. We've got a 63N that's going to be leaving behind him going north out of Valdosta. It sounds like that 923 that we saw on CSX is meeting somebody out at Naylor. So once we get the NS trains, we'll go back and see who's coming north on CSX.
We moved to Humphrey Road, still south and east of Valdosta, where we found a green signal. This is automatic block signal territory, where a green signal merely indicates the block ahead is clear. It doesn't tell you a train is coming behind you, but we knew one was, and it was NS 209. Is daily Atlanta to Jacksonville intermodal traffic for the FEC. It had started to rain now, but the radar showed it would be intermittent. So we pushed on into Valdosta, where we were hearing A724, that regular northbound local, working Valdosta Yard. He was dropping cars into the yard before continuing on toward Montgomery. A lot of these cars will be handed off to the two short lines in Valdosta, the Valdosta Railway to Clyattville and the Cater-Parrott Rail Net. After that, this Sunday morning rain set in steady, and it was time for me to head home.
My thanks to Charles, Alan, William, and Will for their expertise in rail fanning the Bowline. I would have just been sitting there looking at empty track without you guys. Now, please hit the like button if you like this episode. Subscribe if you haven't already done that. Put your comments in the comments section down below. I read every one of them and respond to a lot of them. Email me with any other questions you have at railfandanny@gmail.com. So until next time, somewhere out there on the high iron, this is Danny Harmon, out.